This week on Viewpoints.
It was really isolating, not having Wi-Fi. People were able to text us, but we were not able to text out.
How to prepare in advance if the power grid goes out. Then,
every 6 months, there's some new exercise trend or some hot new supplement or some magical ingredient that's going to make you feel better.
Do wellness products actually work? I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
in recent weeks, a massive cold front swept across much of the country, knocking out power, shutting down roads, and leaving tens of millions dealing with dangerously low temperatures. For some, the disruption lasted hours, but for others it was several days. While that storm is now behind us, scientists warn that extreme weather is becoming more volatile, with stronger storms, deeper freezes, and greater unpredictability. And when those events hit, one of the first things to go out is often the one we rely on most: communication.
You know, a lot of people will do the water thing and they'll do the food thing and a first aid kit, but very rarely did they think about, hey, how am I going to communicate after a disaster hits? Because we become so dependent on cell phone and internet that to many of us, we just can't even imagine a world without it.
That's Joe Bassett, a survival expert and the co-author of the book Emergency Communication 101. He says this dependence creates a dangerous blind spot that only emerges after systems fail. One person who learned this the hard way is Hansen, a writer and producer for us at Viewpoints Radio. Hansen and her husband live in Asheville, North Carolina, where Hurricane Helene in 2024 left much of the region without power, clean water, or reliable communication for months.
The electricity company sent an email saying, hey, we think there's a good chance the power might go out. You should fill your bathtub with water. And I was thinking, what's water got to do with electricity? But it's the city pumps are run by electricity. And so I said, what do I know? I doubt that the storm's going to get all the way up to the mountains because hurricanes don't make it to the mountains. But I filled up the tub anyway. And of course, the water was shut off. We didn't have water for 2 months, no running water for 2 months.
Now, looking back, she shares what would have been most helpful to have during that time.
We have a radio, of course, with AM/FM, but it was plug-in, and we didn't have any batteries for it. So that was really important because we felt cut off from the radio stations that were up and running with emergency messages on the hour, every hour. We did have to go out and charge our phones in the car. And of course, the tank had less than a quarter of a tank. It just so happened. And so we couldn't run the car very often to charge the phones.
You may think, well, why not just wait in the long lines to get gas? But Hansen says all of the gas stations in the region were closed because they also needed electricity to stay open. Some residents in the area who had enough gas drove hours to Charlotte to load up on gas and bring it back.
We found out that there was Wi-Fi at the library. If you stood outside the library, you might be able to pick up Wi-Fi. So a lot of people were standing outside the public library trying to pick up Wi-Fi. I remember I tried sending an email to work to let you guys know that I was okay.
And losing communication doesn't just create logistical challenges, but can also take a heavy psychological toll on people who are used to spending hours on their phones and laptops every day.
It was difficult. It was really isolating, not having Wi-Fi. People were able to text us, but we were not able to text out. So the first time we found out what was happening in Asheville, a relative sent us a photo of the devastating damage. And we were just shocked, that this was going on just a mile away from us. We had no idea of the extent of the damage.
So where to start if you're listening to this and realize you need a communication backup plan? Bassett says the most basic tool is also one of the most important, a simple AM or weather radio that runs on batteries or a hand crank. These can deliver critical emergency information when the grid is down. From there, people can scale up and consider investing in walkie-talkies, satellite devices, or internet-based systems. But he's clear that every option has certain limitations.
There is only one technology that can operate completely independent of the grid, Even satellite phones and satellite devices or something like Starlink, it still is going to depend on the infrastructure at some level. But radio communication, particularly two-way radio communication, can provide that ability for us to talk with somebody else without being on the grid at all, or when there is a complete grid failure.
To some, the idea of a ham radio may feel intimidating or outdated, but ham radio, which is short for amateur radio, is a two-way communication system that doesn't rely on cell towers, Wi-Fi, or the internet. In an emergency, it allows people to send and receive voice messages over long distances using radio waves. Operating a ham radio does require a license, which exists to make sure users understand basic radio rules and how to communicate safely without interfering with other emergency signals. Once you get past that initial learning curve, Bassett says the system is far more accessible than most people expect.
Ham radio is very scalable. To get into ham radio, the license, just the license itself, is going to cost you $35 after you pass an exam. Now, many people can pass that exam very easily. I am a former school teacher, and I had 4th and 5th graders that were able to pass the entry-level ham radio exam. So there's very low learning curve on that. To get started at that level, you can have 2 or 3 of those radios that can reach a mile or two for less than $100.
The biggest mistake, he says, is assuming you can figure all of this out at a moment's notice.
These devices are not plug and play. It's a low learning curve, but there's still a learning curve. And you're going to need to prepare and learn how to use these devices before society collapses or before that big disaster that renders, the government worrying about whether you're licensed or not inapplicable. So you want to make sure that you have those things taken care of beforehand and that you're prepared. Also having a communications plan, even if you don't get into the two-way radio aspect of it, having a communications plan with your family is invaluable. And it works very much like, many of us, we have a fire escape plan for if our house is on fire. And all right, these are our escape routes, and we're all going to meet in the backyard at this place if something happens. Similar type of thing with communication. All right, something happens and, one parent is at work and another parent is out shopping and kids are at school. Well, how are we going to get in touch with us if a disaster hits that hits us unexpectedly?
Preparedness doesn't have to be complicated. It starts with having a reliable way to receive information and knowing where local emergency updates come from in your area. From there, it means building some form of two-way communication, whether that's basic walkie-talkies with neighbors or a licensed radio system. And finally, it requires a plan that everyone understands so every member of the family knows how to check in if the power goes out. As extreme weather becomes more unpredictable, the question isn't whether communication will break down, but when. To learn more about emergency communication planning and our guests, Joe Bassett and Polly Hansen, head to viewpointsradio.org. This story was written by our executive producer, Amirah Zaveri. Our studio manager is Jay Silvers. I'm Gary Price.
Coming up, Americans shelled out $2 trillion on the wellness industry last year. What you should know before buying in when Viewpoints returns.
The In Good Health podcast gives listeners the latest news on what's trending in health, science, technology, and more, featuring medical experts who break down complex topics in a way that's easy to understand.
The mice that ate the salmon that had been fed the soybean meal diet got obese. So it's not just what you eat, but it's what the thing you eat has eaten that's important.
The In Good Health podcast, available wherever you find your favorite podcasts and at ingoodhealthpodcast.org.
If it feels harder than usual to keep your head above water right now, you're not imagining it. The weight of recent national events has many people looking inward, searching for some kind of stress relief. For many, this search leads straight to the wellness industry. From green juices to mood-boosting gummies and skin patches, wellness often comes packaged as a solution. Last year, Americans spent $2 trillion chasing better sleep, skin, nutrition, focus, you name it. But before examining how big the industry has become, We start with something simpler and harder to define. What does wellness even mean anymore?
You're talking about nutrition, fitness, movement, stress management. It's all these different sectors. But at its most basic level, wellness is a pursuit of well-being outside the realm of medicine. So basically everything that medicine and insurance won't touch. So it's all the ways we want to physically, mentally, and spiritually feel better or be healthier. But the term wellness is just so general and vague. There is no agreed upon definition of what well is. And it's one reason why the wellness industry has grown so big.
That's Rena Raphael, journalist and author of The Gospel of Wellness, Gym, Gurus, Goop, and the False Promise of Self-Care. While today's wellness culture may seem new, another expert, Amy LaRocca, says its rise follows a familiar historical pattern.
During times of sort of cultural change and cultural uncertainty, wellness tends to really boom. So we saw in Europe, there was a big wellness surge around the Industrial Revolution when people were worried that life was becoming disconnected from the earth and people were moving from a more agrarian to a more urban, factory-based types of work. And the closest parallel I can draw is that in my lifetime, we've moved from doing things in person to doing things digitally. And that stokes a lot of the same fears that the Industrial Revolution stoked in people back then. And so it speaks to a lot of, desire for things to be real, for desire things to be pure, come in their natural state, protect yourselves from change, the change of society that's really, really scary.
Amy LaRocca is a journalist and the author of How to Be Well, Navigating Our Self-Care Epidemic One Dubious Cure at a Time. During times of uncertainty, she says that focusing on health and wellness can make people feel more in control. But, according to Raphael, the problem isn't wellness itself, it's the way it's marketed. Instead of a tailored approach that focuses on an individual's health and fitness needs, wellness is often sold like fast fashion.
Every 6 months, there's some new exercise trend or some hot new supplement or some magical ingredient that's going to make you feel better, right? I always try to remind people, hey, remember 10 years ago, we were really all into green juice? And then it was kombucha, and then it was energy elixirs, and now it's prebiotic soda. And they're like, oh, yeah, I remember the bone broth era. It's treated like fashion these days. And it works a lot kind of like the way the diet industry worked, which is that, every year there'd be some hot new diet you need to trend, and you kind of put your belief in this thing that this is going to be the thing that finally works for me, and it doesn't work. And then you move on to the next one. You just keep cycling through trends. And that's what's happening with a lot of wellness right now, because so many of these trends have very little, if any, scientific evidence behind them. And they're just kind of pushed by a lot of the creator system, sometimes even media, about this hot new thing that you need to try.
In fact, while working as a reporter for a business magazine, Raphael got an inside look into the inner operations of some of the biggest and most popular wellness companies.
I was a reporter for Fast Company magazine. It's a business magazine, and my whole beat was just the wellness industry. And I was really excited about it. I really kind of drank the Kool-Aid. I moved to LA. I was really into all of these different trends. And the more I started actually reporting on these companies, speaking to their CEOs, to their marketing executives, but also looking at the science, the more I realized that the most popular and some of the biggest wellness companies and products that are being advertised to us have little, if any, scientific evidence. Oftentimes what they're doing is they're exploiting hope. They're exploiting hope for us to have more control over our bodies, not even just over our bodies, over everything that feels uncontrollable in the American life. There is some sort of wellness solution. If you're anxious, download this meditation app. Can't sleep, buy these gummies. About to burn down your white picket fence, try more yoga. We're constantly being told that these are the solutions to everything.
She says the industry puts the burden on individuals when much of today's stress and burnout really stems from deeper systemic failures in our society instead of personal habits.
Our version of wellness is highly individualistic, consumerist, and bursting with productivity pressures. We're constantly told we need to eat right, we need to meditate our complaints away, we need to buy all this stuff. You don't necessarily see that in many other countries that, say, have a better work-life balance or a more attentive or socialized healthcare system or a more communal culture. I think about how right now we're overwhelmed because of a laundry list of legitimate complaints, lack of adequate childcare, paltry work-life balance, the news cycle. And so we obviously can't solve everything. We need relaxation techniques. But a lot of times in the wellness industry, all these solutions ultimately funnel down to buy this thing, the apps, the classes, the spa goodies. So instead of banding together and demanding, systemic solutions or even, demanding something like better women's health research funding, it's about retreating to the self.
Wellness is largely marketed to women, and the data shows they're the ones spending the most. According to a 2024 report from consulting firm McKinsey, women account for about 60% of overall spending in the wellness industry. LaRocca says this is partly because some of them don't get any answers from their doctors. And when this happens, the wellness community offers anything to try.
An example I can give you is autoimmune disease, which disproportionately affects women, has been very, very, very understudied. And women who suffer from autoimmune disease have really found lively communities online to share their experiences, talk about what has helped, what hasn't.
To be clear, some wellness approaches do help. Certain diets, exercises, supplements, and treatments like acupuncture can make a real difference. But LaRocca stresses they're meant to complement modern medicine instead of replacing it. And she warns that when products are labeled clean or organic, people often lower their guard, even when they shouldn't.
One of the things I've found really interesting is how willing people are to take their natural skepticism that they are applying to things like, their health and self-care, and then just throw it out the window as soon as a label reading natural or organic or wellness is applied. So people are saying, I need to get off my prescription drugs. It's bad for my health, but very willingly replace them with supplements, which are totally unregulated and, have even partial labeling.
Neither LaRocca nor Raphael dismiss wellness outright, but Raphael cautions against chasing whatever product or fad is trending.
The thing I will say is that wellness is so individualized. What might work for me might not work for you. Some people feel really great after they go for a run. Some people, that's not what works for them. Some people need to go on a walk with a cup of tea. So I think people really need to be honest about what works for themselves personally versus what's being sold to them as the hot new thing.
To find out more about Rena Raphael, Amy LaRocca, and all of our featured guests, visit viewpointsradio.org. For more behind the scenes, check out Viewpoints Radio on X, Facebook, and Instagram. This segment was written and produced by Grace Galanti. Our executive producer is Amirah Zaveri. Our studio manager is Jay Silvers. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
This is Viewpoints Explained. I'm Ebony McMorris. How many subscriptions do you have? It's not just streaming services anymore. Subscriptions now range from digital storage to add-on car features to even same-day grocery deliveries. The Federal Trade Commission says many Americans underestimate how much they're really spending every month. These reoccurring payments used to be the exception, but now they're the default, and it can all add up fast. A 2024 Deloitte report found that the average U.S. household is subscribed to 4 streaming services. More than 40% of respondents say it feels like too much and they don't use it enough. There's also a bigger shift happening that many of us don't think about: ownership. When you stream music or movies, you're renting this content. Cancel a subscription like Spotify, and you no longer have ad-free access to all the playlists and curated content you've built. And it's not just entertainment. Some automakers now charge monthly fees to use heated seats, remote start, or advanced navigation. All features that are already installed within your car, but unusable without the fee. shift into the retail sector, and more companies are also locking free shipping or basic discounts behind paid memberships. In some cases, the convenience is nice. However, this extra invisible spending may be cutting too deep into your monthly budget. That's why financial experts suggest doing regular subscription check-ins at least twice a year so you can take a look at what you're actually using versus what's just quietly charging you each month. Because in this economy, keeping track of where every dollar goes can be just as important as how much you make. That's Viewpoints Explained for this week. More in a moment.
Welcome to Culture Crash, where we examine what's new and old in entertainment. This year's Oscar nominations for Best Picture are chock full of interesting performances, screenplays, and cinematography, and the full slate does a good job of representing the different kinds of films people were loving in 2025. The odds-on favorite to win the biggest award of the night is One Battle After Another, Paul Thomas Anderson's political revolutionary epic, inspired by Vineland by Thomas Pynchon. Stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Benicio del Toro, Sean Penn, and Teyana Taylor are all nominated for their performances, as is PTA, both for directing and adapted screenplay. Ryan Coogler's horror drama juggernaut Sinners became the most nominated film of all time, nabbing 16 in total, including nods for picture, director, and original screenplay. Another blockbuster from last year, the adrenaline-pumping racing movie F1, starring Brad Pitt, also secured one of the 10 slots. Smaller fare got its share of the lineup as well, with Chloe Zhao's Hamnet, Clint Bentley's Train Dreams, and Yorgos Lanthimos' Begonia all securing nominations. Political thriller The Secret Agent became just the second Brazilian film ever nominated for Best Picture. The Norwegian film Sentimental Value represents director Joachim Trier's second time making a film that secured Oscar nominations, but first in the Best Picture category. Rounding out the list of 10 nominees is Guillermo del Toro's adaptation of Frankenstein and Josh Safdie's Marty Supreme, which memed itself to great box office success and very well may secure Timothée Chalamet his first Oscar for Best Actor. The quality of a given year's Oscar lineup can vary wildly, but this year's list is a good sampling of movies both big and small, foreign and domestic from the year 2025. All 10 of which are worth a watch before Hollywood's biggest night on March 15th. I'm Evan Rook.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.